Dentro Rafa. Gol! Ebram! Gol! È l'azione più bella del mondo! È l'azione più bella!
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the SempreMilan podcast. Started with my mic in the wrong place. Technical difficulties early on. I'm your host Ollie Fisher, joined once again by Anthony, the PSG Ultra Torgrud.
Yeah, no particular reason. I just really felt like wearing the shirt today, so that's why this is on. It's basically the new Milan kit, you know. And yeah, happy to be here. Happy to chit chat about things that might be fun.
I'll just move this scarf off the.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ah, good fun, eh? Good footballing fun. We got a lot to talk about. I mean, plenty of things. Two things have actually happened. Like, we've made two actual appointments, which are obviously pretty damn big. But there has been a flurry of news as well in the last 24, 48 hours pertaining to player movement. So we got that to talk about, and we got a big list of listener questions to get through as well. So I often think as we end May and we go into June that I'm going to have a nice quiet few weeks after the season ends. Never happens. It certainly hasn't happened the last 2 years. We instead seem to have gone full reset. And then we've done it again this year. But I can't complain because it means that things are changing. Before we dive into this week's episode, thank you, as always, to our Substack founding members, Des Windsor McGlynn, Tito, Matt Morris, Pullman, Joey Gawler, Kemin, MJ, Mats, Luke Villano, Raul Escobar, Jack, Calafassi, Nasser, Merlin Finker, Derek Favoretto, Hevanly 13, Mike Schulz, JT Physio, Tarek, Marco Villela, Roberto Racinos, Ken, and Medi K. Appreciate the support. We're going to have plenty of stuff coming on the Substack over the summer because it is going to be hectic, chaotic, revolutionary, you might say. On the Substack, you can find the most recent pub chat, which Lorenzo and Stefano recorded over the weekend. It was their initial reaction to the return of Max Allegri. But watch it after this. Apologies if you can hear a siren outside. I do live in London. Watch it after this because we're going to speak about Allegri's return too. The bonus podcast that we did at the end of last week was reacting to our 2024-25 season predictions, which was fun. Isaac jumped on with me and you for that one. And yeah, it's always the most humiliating episode of the year, that. A real humbling experience.
We won't name any names, but there is someone who picked Musa as a breakout player of the year. Mm-hmm. And no, he's not a regular on the podcast before you guys just assume it was me or Madison. It wasn't, I promise.
We could say it's Madison. Yeah, go watch that. It's fun. We get a lot of things wrong. Some things right, but yeah. Napoli winning the league kind of messed up everything, you could say. Isaac's most recent bonus article that he did was it's like a big collective deep dive into the player ratings for the last season. Added them all together, did an average, and determined who the top three were in overall average rating. And then also looked at some of the worst individual performances of the season and some of the best ones. So go check that out. And there's a newsletter as well, which talks about how the work can begin. Now we've got a couple of the key pieces in place. And in that, you get a summary of the biggest news stories from the previous week. All right. Speaking of big stories from the previous week, we need to go back to last Monday because we finally, after... well, what is it, like over 2 years of having it unoccupied, finally appointed a new sporting director. And I'm going to start with Igli Tare, but I know that we're going to end up kind of, merging into discussions about what his first big move was, which was the return of Massimiliano Allegri as head coach. But yeah, last Monday was finally confirmed that Tare has joined the club. They didn't mention how long the deal is, but it's widely reported to be... a 3-year contract, of which one is an option. He did 15 years at Lazio, working under Claudio Lotito, in which they won 6 trophies, responsible for some of the best players in their history being there during that period. And he'd been out of work since leaving them back in 2023. Happy?
Yes, very happy. He wasn't my first pick. We went down the list and there was a bunch of different names that came up, but I don't think either of us were wildly against Tare, but at least for me, and I don't remember who you were most favorable to, I don't think he was my top pick of the bunch.
Mm.
Fairly, I don't want to say unremarkable because that's not fair to him. You know, he's a known quantity in Serie A, so that helps a lot. And just seeing the rumors that have sprung up since in just the last week and a half, 2 weeks, have been very refreshing. Players you've heard of, you know,
Yeah.
players in the league, and not Tingus Pingus from wherever. You know, it's actually people you know and go, okay, that's a good signing. I like that move, and you know, not every move's going to work. We know that. That's just how it goes. But it's left me feeling confident, and the fact that the outgoing players have seemed to be you know, decent money deals as well. Not just saying okay and letting them go, or not forcing people to stay that don't want to be here and then let them leave on freeze. You know, it just everything seems like he's been there, done that, and he's going to keep doing it the way he can. And then it came out after the signing that he apparently has always wanted to work for Milan. I don't know,
Mm.
a fan, but his son made an
That's what he
Instagram
said.
post that basically said, you know, this is your dream job, Dad. I know you've always wanted to be here, blah blah blah, and it kind of seems to show it. It's definitely been, you know, big moves, quick moves, and it's good. And it seems like some players who were on the fence about wanting to stay are now open to the idea of staying because of him and Allegri and the other moves that are coming out. So hopefully we see, you know, some return to form.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a very well kept secret, was it, that we were in the market for a new sporting director? And it also wasn't a particularly well kept secret that I think we prioritized the hiring of somebody that was already in a job. Like, you know,
Mhm.
because if we wanted the fact of the matter is we've spoken with Tare in February. Ibra and Cardinale actually met him in London. I didn't see them. But met with them in February, and then Furlani did that whole thing of flying out and saying, "Hang on, I call the shots
Yeah.
here." So the process basically restarted again. But then Furlani met with Tare, and things went quiet again for another 2 or 3 weeks, and then out of nowhere, this acceleration came. Now, I hold the belief that things were probably tied up in that first meeting with Furlani, and then they were just kept under wraps until the
Mhm.
season officially ended, and then all the announcement comes out and stuff. But it's certainly clear that we didn't pick him after the first meeting, and I think it's absolutely fine to set your sights on profiles that you think might be a better fit for various reasons, and then to go for somebody who's very much competent and available. I don't think it's as bad a PR look as some people are making out, but you know, we know some of the names that were linked. Tony D'Amico at Atalanta, Mana at Napoli was briefly linked. Giuntoli's out of a job, of course. Sartori at Bologna being another one as well. Those are names that if we were still pursuing them now, we wouldn't have a sporting director.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah, it's
um,
go ahead.
I was just to say that that's the risk that you run. You can put your eggs in the basket of somebody who is currently under employment elsewhere with a multi-year contract, and you can be left with nothing at the end of it. And if we still didn't have anyone in, now we're gone into June, I think it would have been very bad optically for the club.
Mhm.
So they explored the market, shall we say. They had a look at what was out there. They probably pitched a bit of a project to some people who were currently still in work, but they always had the fallback that Tare is a pretty solid, a pretty reliable choice. And then they went for him. They were able to get it done quickly. He was obviously waiting and hoping for the call that did eventually come. I put something on Twitter, and I just will paraphrase it. I don't think it's a home run appointment, but I don't really. What is a home run sporting director in the modern age? Because we're not going to go and poach Luis Campos from PSG, are we?
Mhm.
You know, like it would have to be someone from another club in and around us in Italy if we were to poach anybody at all. And that wasn't going to happen. So then you go for perhaps some might have said that the best free agent on the market was Fabio Paratici, but it's well documented the reasons that we turned away from him. And of course, now we've ended up with Igli Tare. And the most important aspect of this is timing. You know,
Mhm.
he's having such a long runway to plan for the summer. And he's already got that first big thing on his to-do list ticked off. So that can only be a positive, I think.
Yeah, and to their credit, the last week of the season, Rulani said next week will be the week of announcements, and then the week came and there were two announcements, Tare and Allegri. So they did have it lined up, and just going back to the interviewing process of all the other people, when you're looking for a job, not many people in the real world are naive enough to think they're the only candidate. And so the job's going to
Yeah.
talk to quite a few people. And on sports, it's the exact opposite. It's weird because the employer reaches out and says, "Hey, we think you might be a good fit for our job. Let's talk." And so it is a bit different, but it's still kind of the same thing where you're allowed to talk to a lot of people and you get multiple ideas. And like you said, it's okay to pick the first person, even if you've interviewed 3, 4, 5. You want to make sure you have the right guy. You may be sold on a project right away, but with the way this club operates, we have 5 or 6 different people making a decision. So you might want to say, okay, let's get a few more candidates in here and take a look. And ultimately, I don't think Tari is a bad profile. I mean, excuse me, sir. You saw what he did with Lazio, and now you give him a club like Milan. Maybe we have a bigger budget right now. Who knows? I really don't know. But he's clearly been told something that made him say, "Yeah, I could be successful here." So and that's the good thing about sport is it's not just, oh, you hired an employee. It's the employee has a decision to say, "I don't think this is the right fit for me," and you can walk because you can make millions elsewhere as well. So I think any appointment means that there was some sort of agreement where they thought it would be successful,
Mm-hmm.
which is always the basis. But this one, I mean, look, it's been 2 weeks and we've seen big names linked, and we've seen Allegri come in, which is arguably the biggest name available coach, I would say right now, outside of like Klopp, who we don't even know if he wants to continue coaching at the moment. So yeah, I mean, it's hard to be angry with this one. I think they got it right, and it's the first step of many towards recovery, an image recovery for the ownership. If they could keep hitting it right, slowly people start accepting the changes, and then they won't be as mad at the club. But they got to make a lot of right moves before that's forgiven.
Yeah, that's an important thing to highlight as well before we get too carried away by the fact that we've got two important hires done before the end of June. Is that it's no magic fix. There's still an awful lot that needs to be done in order to rebuild that trust with the fan base. But I think it is refreshing to see us do things with to be decisive, and to just do things quickly and with. And I know people will rightly point out the fact that the sporting director thing did descend into a bit of a saga. It did, but also we were never going to hire anybody before the end of the season anyway. So ultimately, all's well that ends well, and we got the guy in right after the end of the season, and you can't ask for anything better than that in terms of a window of timing.
Another thing that we genuinely don't know, we do know that Tari was interviewed early on, right, in February. What if they did agree to it then and say, okay, you're going to come in at the end of the season, and then they just started feeding the media red herrings, oh, they're talking to this guy, talking to this guy,
It's
it
possible.
happens. That's super common in sport. And then that gives Tare an extra 5-4 months to plan, to start talking to people. Do you think this was the first day he talked to Max? Probably not. They might have had discussions where he said, hey, I'm most likely going to Milan in June. Come with, and then they were able to kind of work out the intricate, finer details because it moves so quickly over a long period. And then it was time. They said, okay, here's the contract, sign it. Boom. So we can't rule that out either. He may have been working for a few months already, knowing that there's unsettled players. We saw Morata's interview today basically saying the reason I left is because Conceição was changing everything, causing problems, and I didn't want to be a part of it. Not the first person to say that, won't be the last, I would assume. So, there's a lot of image repair that needs to be done. And I think we're on the right path, but we'll see if they continue down that or not. Never know.
Yeah, I mean, the full background for obvious non-disclosure reasons will never emerge. But I perhaps it isn't a coincidence that you've got two two figures that we've ended up hiring who have been out of work for over a year, and then the moment the season's done, both are in the door pretty quickly. Perhaps that means that it was done a long time ago, but regardless, you've got to presume that the way that this whole hiring a director process went is that we sat down with the various candidates and it was a job interview. Ultimately, that's what it is.
Yeah.
So as part of that, surely the candidates had to pitch their ideas and their plans, what they would do if they were given the reins. And what Tare has said is A, obviously been enough to get him the job, but B, something that he's had months of run up to think about. Whereas if you do get someone like D'Amico or Sartori in the door, they probably haven't been thinking about what they do with our squad because they're at Atalanta, they're at Bologna already fighting for objectives. Like Tare, though, on the flip side, has been spoken to in February, and you think he missed a game between then and the end of the season? You know, Allegri apparently, and we'll come on to him, we are going to talk more about Max, but he didn't miss a game all season. So you're going for two people who know exactly what we were last season. They saw it all, and they will have ideas about what needs to be done to fix it. And why? Because they have built winning teams before. Okay, with Lazio, it was a Coppa Italia and Super Coppa, but you know, I'd have taken that double last season. I'd take it again next season. Like that would be fine. And as you rightly said, I think importantly, the budgetary situation for him will be a little bit different, and he will probably relish the opportunity to work under an ownership that is less politically difficult than Lotito, because we know what that power struggle was, and Tare as well had a very good eye for a coach at Lazio. You know, he had Petkovic, who won the Coppa Italia in that final derby against Roma. Pioli, who took them to Champions League place. They finished third under him. Simone Inzaghi and the era that they had. Sarri, who took them to second in the league in a Champions League place. Like, he's clearly able to do that as well. And we got the coach in the door pretty quickly, as it turns out. But I think there's a track record there which is encouraging. Now, any Lazio fans that are listening for whatever reason, or any of Tare's doubters, critics, whatever, will also rightly point out that with his time at Lazio, and 15 years is a massive sample size, so you can draw whatever trends from it you want, basically. But there's sort of like, it's two halved in two ways, because you've got, he certainly had more hits at the beginning of his time there. In fact, up until really the last sort of 2 or 3 years. And then some of the signings went a little bit awry. And he also seemed to hit on the lower end deals rather than the high end. When they started spending, around 20 mil upwards of that, things didn't go particularly well. Whereas some of the players that they brought in for a way lower fee ended up being a massive success.
I think those are the hardest deals, though, in the sport right now, is that 20 million range, because that's either players who are not that good but aren't bad, or good players that are having really bad seasons and you don't know where they're going to be. You know, the injury prone guys. That's the cut rate that we found a lot of success in, but also we found a lot of failure in. You know, that's in today's market, that's the hardest price point. I would almost rather go for those 5 million euro signings, because, you know, it's a young guy who's just new, that's unknown. You don't know if he's good or bad, versus the guy it's like, okay, it's just, you don't get a world-class player for 25 million anymore. It's very rare. Obviously, we hit it with Pulisic and Reijnders, but it's very rare. You know, we missed it a lot more than we hit. So, yeah, I mean, if that's where he started making mistakes, it's like, okay, well, that's the 50-50 range, you know? If we start spending 40 mil plus, then if it misses, it's a bigger issue, because that's where you should be getting known quantities, players that are always going to perform. And, you know,
I think the 20 mil range that we hit with has now become the 30 mil range, because of the way that transfer business is going in football. So, like previously in 2019, when we built that core of players with, you know, the likes of Theo, Leao, Benacer, players that came in for a really similar amount of money, and then ended up, you know, serving us very well. Okay, some might leave this summer, but even Maignan, for example, was a lower cost signing. But now, and when Tare made those 20 million signings, it's just the rate of inflation almost. And now you have to spend 30 mil plus to have a decent shot at one of these gambles, or you have to spend even more than that for a known quantity. You know, that's why Bongiorno, for example, as we spoke about him so often last summer and how he would be a good fit. There's a reason he went for 35 million plus, and that's because to buy established quality, you have to pay that rate. And it'll be interesting to see, with the head coach that we've hired, will that be the move to go for ready-made players, and will the budget be boosted by other things such as the willingness to get rid of certain stars? We are going to do a little rumour roundup at some point in this, but let's move on. Let's talk about Max. This moved very quickly, very quickly. We were thinking Allegri, if we work backwards from the announcement, which was on the Friday afternoon, he's believed to have signed his contracts and everything on the Thursday. And then later that night, Sergio Conceição's departure was announced. I say announced, as you rightly pointed out. They never actually said he's leaving. They just said, thanks for your work.
It was very weird. Yeah.
Hey,
thanks for helping us out. Like, you're out. I mean, they very obviously, right, took up the break clause, which is fine. It was just a weird thing. I mean, I didn't go on the website to see if there was like a comunicado oficial or anything like that, but I just saw the Instagram
yeah, it was
video.
like that. Yeah, they used the club crest graphic instead of like a picture of him or anything. So it's kind of like, oh, that's the chop. But yeah, so so Allegri was in the door on the Thursday. As of the Wednesday, though, it seemed as if he was still potentially going to Napoli, because Napoli were unsure about whether Antonio Conte would walk out the door. Now, I'll use this opportunity, I think, to recap what was a chaotic Wednesday. This Tuesday, Wednesday, I'll say both days. It's at this point that it comes out Simone Inzaghi is strongly considering the idea of going to Al Hilal in Saudi Arabia. Napoli are still unsure about whether they're keeping Antonio Conte, so that's the top two potentially changing coaches. Gasparini's left Atalanta and is going to Roma, which is kind of crazy. Juve have still got a caretaker in charge. They're waiting for Conte. Then, as it would turn out, Conte stays with Napoli. They're left with nothing. Who the hell finished fifth? Roma. So Roma got Gasparini. Lazio have binned Baroni off and have gone to get Maurizio Sarri back. Fiorentina, Palladino's walked out the door, which I don't think anybody was really expecting, but apparently he's been offering himself around to other Serie A clubs in the meantime. Then you've got us. Obviously, we went for Allegri when he was still being considered by Napoli. Who else have we got in there? Oh, yeah, and then Bologna, who had to it took 3 meetings for them to convince Italiano to stay when they ended up finishing. I know he won a trophy and he'll be a hero there for that, but they finished 9th and he needed a massive pay hike to be convinced of staying. So it was just a crazy day, and it remains mad.
And there really was a lot of, waiting. It seemed like everyone knew what their first choice was, and it all depended on Conte leaving, because it seemed like Juve wanted Conte, and then Napoli wanted Allegri, and we wanted Italiano, and everyone was like on edge, kind of waiting for that last moment. And then it almost seemed as if, like, when the Allegri to Napoli rumor started ramping up, that we said, okay, we got to swoop in there immediately, which I guess would conflict with what I just said earlier about how this was all pre-planned and probably done around February. But that's the way the media sold it. So it was like, who are we going to get? And there were rumors of us going for Conte. There was rumors of Conte going back to Inter, going to Juve, all kinds of stuff. And then it seemed like something turned in that meeting with Napoli for Conte, and it was probably the signing of Kevin De Bruyne, let's be real, or he said, okay, I'm going to stay. Because before it got announced, all of a sudden it was like, yeah, Allegri's open to Milan. Allegri's going to Milan. He's there. And then it was like, Italiano's renewed. And then Inzaghi probably going to Al Hilal still. And then we were interested in Sarri for a little bit. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, he's at Lazio. Gasparini was interviewed by Juventus, and he's like, nah, I'm going to Roma. And then Pioli's been linked to Inter. He's been linked to Juventus. He's been linked to Atlanta.
Fiorentina, Lazio.
Fiorentina. I mean, all of them. So
yeah,
it's been chaotic on the manager front. And I'm glad I don't know if we would say we were the first to get it done, but in terms of new managers in the door, I think we might have been. The 3 other ones where renewals got done first, but that's not too surprising.
That's the thing that I think is refreshing to me, is that when you consider consider the fact that Tare is in and he acted so decisively. I think he said in an interview with Albanian TV like a couple of months before he joined us that, in his opinion, Allegri and Conte are the two best Italian coaches. Now, it's since come out that he has quite... What's that?
Hard to disagree. You look at the
Yeah,
resumes.
yeah, and just winning CVs and everything. But I think he also held Italiano in high regard, so maybe wanted to just see if there was an opening there. But ultimately, Allegri's available, and you test the waters, see how far along things are with Napoli, and can you? And it was what they call a blitz, and rightly so. We had a... I said we, I wasn't there, but Tare and Ibra had a dinner with Allegri on the Tuesday night, it was. And then into Wednesday, all the rumours are starting to catch up. Like, oh, this is serious. They've put an offer on the table. They've spoken already about transfers and things like that. And then, by the Thursday, he's there to sign the contract. So, in relative terms, because we know how long things can take with us, and we know how long things can take in Italian football, it was done very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's nice to sort of cash our chips in a little bit and now just sit back and watch everybody else panic. Now, it's only early June, but with the Club World Cup and that mini transfer window before, with pre-seasons getting earlier and earlier, with these tours out to four corners of the globe to play friendlies and things, it's becoming more and more important, I think, to get big things done early on.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll come on to transfer rumours that are doing the rounds at the moment. But to get Allegri in, to get Tare in, two figures who've been able to kind of sit back and watch us and sit back and watch the league play out this season, and knowing that we've got one game a week coming up all season, I think that this is a massive opportunity for us.
Yeah.
I also said, I wrote a big feature before the 20... I can't remember if it was 23-24 or after we won the Scudetto, but it was basically the line of it was that stability would be our biggest weapon.
I remember that.
Everyone else was changing coaches, and we could go with Pioli, and we still had the same core of players. And at that point, as you always are, we were optimistic about the transfer business we've done. I'm thinking this is a chance for us to open up a successful era. We know that things didn't play out that way, unfortunately. And then last summer, it was the complete opposite. We were one of the teams that were in that tumble cycle of like, who the fuck are we going to end up with here? It's Lopetegui, nope, let's go back on that. We're linked with De Zerbi, we're linked with, Sarri.
That was the difference is we could not land on a coach. It was like a week before preseason when we finally announced Fonseca. It took forever. And that was a disaster. I think everyone always knew that the longer you wait, the harder it is for them to acclimate, right? And this one, it was so important to get done immediately. And it's a big name, probably the biggest name we could have got right now. The other thing that stuck out to me is the budget for a coach was about half of what we ended up giving Allegri. So that means we're really investing in him. Like we're going in. We're saying this is our guy. We're going to back him. And the other thing that stuck out to me is I saw a report that there is a bonus in his contract for winning the Scudetto, but not one for winning the Champions League. And on the surface, you're like, well, duh, we're not in the Champions League. But if the idea is you're signing a successful manager, that you'll be back in it pretty quickly, right? So to me, what that says is if there's a bonus in for both of them, it's pretty blanket. It's just like, here you go. But if it's just Scudetto, that to me says, Max said, no, I'm going to win this. I could win this league, and I know how to do it with this team. And when I accomplish that, I want a little something. And they said, okay, prove it. So, and maybe I'm reading that too much. Maybe it is just pretty generic. Like, here's a bonus if you win. But that to me gives me positive feelings that it's like, okay, maybe they're already thinking ahead. They're taking this rebuild very seriously. I know that last season when Fonseca came in, the first thing Zlatan said was, our objective is a Scudetto this season. And clearly we didn't accomplish that. But it was never realistic with a guy like Fonseca. And it was interesting that they kept going for Portuguese profiles and different styles. Whereas Max is a known quantity. He's Italian. He's got tons of Scudetti under his belt. He's done this. He's been there. And he's been at the club already. I don't know, man. I have really good feelings. I know we always talk about like terrorism ball with Allegri. His play style sucks. 1-0 boring games. Look, after the season we had, I will take 38 1-0 wins all day. Yep. The ugliest games. I don't care if it's 95th minute Musa tap in. I do not care. I'll be there and I'll celebrate. I'll be thrilled if we could just get it right. And also, I think some of our players are too good to make it bad football. I think guys like Leao, if we get him running, guys like Pulisic, Santiago Jimenez might be good under him. Morata comes back. He was always good under Allegri. Who knows? There's so many players. And I think you're seeing also the pull of Allegri to convince players to stay. Guys who, we know Theo wants out. He probably is still leaving. Mike's renew is on hold now. Now we're seeing that he's open talks again, and he's like, okay, maybe I'm good to go. Pulisic had a renewal tabled, and he said, I want to know the future because I'm not too sure what's going on anymore. And all of a sudden, that changed the day that Allegri was announced. Again, we don't know if it's true, but that was the story. You're seeing it with the big name players, guys like Tomori, who were a foot and a half out the door. He'll be happy to work under Allegri, So I could see things going well. Benacer's coming back. He might even be really, really good under Allegri, and who knows, maybe even Reijnders stays. I know that's highly unlikely, but I just feel like he's a coach that all these players will say, I would be happy to give this a go.
Yeah.
Theo might just be out the door regardless. He might just be ready for a new chapter. That's fine. But I think at 27, you could get a few good years out of him with Allegri.
Yeah, you've got to presume with this that Igli Tare, I think, with his arrival, there's some doubts about exactly how much control he's going to have because, it was written in the first paragraph of the official statement, he will report directly to the CEO, Giorgio Furlani. But he already seems to be making some pretty big calls, does Tare. But then for him to go get Allegri, you really have to presume that those two have got 99% of the control over what's about to happen. And with that will have had to come some assurances, I think, because if Allegri's still talking to others, his agent confirmed that there were a number of offers that came in. We know he turned down big money from Saudi Arabia and stuff like that. It would have to be the right project for him. So, yeah, with that comes some guarantees about players that he wants to stay, transfer budget, you'd imagine. And also, I've never been in one of these meetings, but I have to imagine that managers already have a list of players that they'd quite like to bring with them or bring in. So that all serves as important context for, I think, what we're about to see. And if it does reshuffle some of the cards that we thought were on the table, like some of those players leaving. But I think that, like, it's a name above all, isn't it? Like we've seen Allegri hoist however many major trophies at Juventus. I mean, he won 5 Scudetti in a row, as part of that dominant run. He won 5 Coppa Italia with them. He holds the record as the manager to win the most Coppa Italia trophies. He won the Supercoppa with them twice. Of course, he won the League and Supercoppa with us. He won a lot of Serie A Coach of the Year awards and things like that. And I think
he had the most Serie A titles of any coach. I would imagine during that.
It's definitely Coppa Italia, but has 5 in a row been done before?
I doubt it.
I mean, obviously, it ended up being 9, didn't it? But yeah, he's a winner. So I think it's important as well that we debunk some of the myths that surround Allegri, and in particular his tenure at Juve. But also some of the criticism that's been doing the rounds about this particular appointment. Now, I'm not saying with 100% certainty that this is going to be a success, but I think for all the things that we've mentioned to this point and things that we're about to say, I think he gives us as good a chance at success next season as any coach. And that's all you can ask for, right? We can't go get Luis Enrique, unfortunately. So here we are. We've got Allegri. So people say that Juve team that he inherited was Conte built. And I think that there's an element of that that's true. But also, is it not sometimes really hard to follow an era of such success? You've got to go in there, take over from the coach that everyone saw as dad, who won so many things with them. And you've got to try and put your own stamp on things. And I think he did a pretty damn good job of doing that. Obviously, won Scudetti in his first 5 seasons in charge. The first season, Juve won it by 17 points over second place Roma. They scored 72 goals that season in 38 games, which was the league high. 20 15-16, obviously they won it again. They got 91 points. They won 29 of their 38 games. They scored 75 goals, so almost 2 per game, and they only let in 20. They had a 55 goal difference. Napoli on 82 points that season, so they haven't been pushed all the way there. But then the next season, 16-17, they got 91 points, so over 90 points again. They won 29 games again, scored 77 goals, let in 27. Roma was second with 87 points, and they won their last 4 games that season, Roma. They got pushed all the way that year, Juve. So it wasn't just a walkover. 2017-18, Juve win it with 95 points. They win 30 of their 38 games. They score 86 goals and let in 24. A 62-goal difference is just mental. And Napoli that season, again, pushed them all the way. They got 91 points. You know, you got 2 teams there that were right up their arse, but they never let go. And it's important to note at this point that they went deep in the Champions League. You know, Allegri went to 2 Champions League finals with Juve. And he lost both of them, but we were in an era at that point where we didn't know if we were going to see an Italian team go so deep in the Champions League again. But it was always going to be Juve, if anybody.
The teams that he lost to, I mean, Ronaldo's Madrid and Messi's Barca. Like, you can't hold that against anyone. And the other thing to point out is, the squad that he inherited was built by Conte, but Allegri was there longer. It's not like there were no transfers. Most of those players left. He replaced most of them. You know, of course they didn't all leave. Of course there were players who were there even before Conte. You know, that back line was established the whole time, but there were still changes, you know, and it still was his team. It just didn't start that way, which is how it is with any manager going to a new club. Of course, they're inheriting someone else's team. It's what they do after that. And they had transfer business every year. Every single season, they made big signings. So it wasn't like it was just, well, he got Conte's team and he just knew what to do with it. It was, he got Conte's team. He knew what to do with it. And he improved on it and made it his team. And it won. It worked.
Yeah, it did. And in the final season of his first spell, they got 90 points again. Won 28 out of 38 games, scored 70, let in 30. You're seeing a theme here, basically. They always won 28 to 30 games. They always scored 2 goals per game and conceded around about 0.5 goals per game on average. I mean, that is just, you know, remarkable. And in that 2018-19 season, they won the league by 11 points over Napoli, and they didn't win any of their last 5. Then he comes back in 2021, and this is a different Juve that he's come back to. You know, they're in corporate chaos. We know what deals like he had Ronaldo. I think the last year of his first time around. So the first year of Ronaldo's time there. But we know what COVID did to every football club basically around the world. But it completely shook up the landscape. And I think Juve, when they signed Ronaldo, were not expecting to be without stadium revenues for so long and things like that. But it was a very, very different situation that he took over there. But they finished in the top 4 in 2021-22, the season that we, of course, won the Scudetto. And they got 70
They got it on the field day.
Yeah. Then the following season, 2022-23, of course, they had we finished 4th that season. They finished 7th, 62 points. And they had the deduction, the points penalty.
Points? Yeah.
And we're kicked out of European competition. And they won 22 games out of 38 that season. So without that deduction, they would have been well and truly in. And then,
they would have been above us.
Last season, I mean 2023-24, they finished 3rd behind us and Inter with 71 points. So it would have consistently got a Juve team that were in ruin into the top 4. And then, of course, he won the Coppa Italia over Atalanta. That's the trophy. I know it's because it's probably the most recent, but that's the trophy that sticks out for me above all of them, is that last Coppa Italia that he won, because Atalanta were the big favourites, it felt like, going into that final. Like, they were by far the better team watching stuff. But Allegri did an Allegri, and they won 1-0. And it was just like, you can't fucking beat this guy. You know, he's just a master of these domestic
and that's
finals.
what it takes. You know, at the end of the day, we all would love to see a final end 5-0 against our rivals, having them lose on the biggest stage, a former player scoring the opening goal against them. I don't think of a specific scenario. I can't think of when that last happened. Saturday. But you know, if you win 1-0 in an ugly final, no one cares. You won. You got the trophy. You know, winners celebrate, losers explain. And Allegri's a winner, so he celebrates a lot.
Yeah, and look, I totally understand all of the reservations that people have, but again, I think that there needs to be. It's like a revisionist narrative to me. You know, we spent all of last season saying we can't experiment with foreign coaches, we can't keep taking gambles on people who have won it, who haven't won anything. So we go for the winningest coach that's available, and people are like, no, not that guy. We spent all of last season saying how bad we were defensively and that we needed fixing because we were wide open in transition and all these different things. So we go for a coach that can fix our biggest problem. No, it can't be that guy. You know, I just think there's so many things that, like, it's not quite beggars can't be choosers. Like, we're not in that position. You know, there probably were other interesting names out there that we could have got, but it's like, seriously, like this is absolutely fine. There's no need to be so hyperbolic and say, I'm not going to watch another game while this guy's in charge. And I've seen some mad shit like that.
I've heard some takes.
Yeah, there's been some takes. And look, there's Allegri's side of things as well, which is that he knows he needs to pick his next job very carefully. And I think he's shown a certain flexibility in his style as well over his, over a decade in charge of various clubs. In fact, my God, it'd be like coming up to 20 years now that he's been a head coach, but he's shown flexibility in terms of using various formations. He's shown flexibility in terms of different tactical approaches because, as read off all the data there, his first Juve teams were entertainers. They were really good to watch.
Mm-hmm.
They blew teams away. He adapted and became more pragmatic because the Juve team he had in his second spell in charge were not very good. You know, they had Morata up front. I'll say that, and they actually got a tune out of Morata.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay with it. I'm not dancing for joy like if we'd have gone and got Conte, but I'm nearly there. It was the second best choice for me in terms of a guarantee.
Agreed.
Right, let's move on then and talk about some transfer rumors. Where do you want to start? Should we start with
from the top?
From the top. What's the top?
Hopefully you have an idea.
All right, okay. Let's go with Reijnders briefly because this one there hasn't been an awful lot of update. When I reel off certain bits of information here, you can just presume it's what all the major sources are saying. I'm not going to cite every single bit of information, but it sounds like City made an initial bid around 60 million euros for Tijani Reijnders, which we deemed to be not enough. We said, you want him for the Club World Cup, pay up a bit more. Sounds like 75 million euros will get the deal done. They haven't yet come back with an improved bid, and time is ticking a little bit. You know, it's just over a week that the Club World Cup starts. So if they want to get everything done and dusted by then, we know things can be closed very quickly, especially when you've got the money that City do. They can just chuck an extra 5 million down, no problem. My gut feeling is that this still does get done because that's what all the noise is saying. But I hope we are charging a premium for the fact that they're getting him for competition that could net 100 million in winnings, you know, if you go that far.
Yeah. And they're a favorite.
So,
they have to be.
Yeah, they do. They do. I will be... I mean, we won't go fully into it because I think it would deserve a separate analysis if he were to leave based on the figures that come out and things. I would be obviously gutted if he left. He is, for me, right up there with Christian Pulisic and probably Rafael Leao, our most important players, one of the players that makes things happen, being the scorer of some big goals. You know, his numbers last season were outstanding. He is officially the best midfielder in Serie A, and he would leave a massive gap that needs to be filled. You can't get away from that. You know, I think it would be difficult for the club from a PR perspective to follow up the Tare and Allegri hype with selling someone that they'd probably like to build around. Mm-hmm. But I'm also like, he's been here 2 years. You know, it's modern football. Players, unfortunately, don't spend their lifetimes at clubs anymore. And I noticed how the narrative changed very quickly from the reports that came out from Reijnders isn't going to push for a move. You know, he loves Milan and he just wants everything to be right for everyone. They're saying now he's happy to go and he would be happy to play under Pep and all these things.
Yeah.
So I don't think that he's been done any disservice. He's going to nearly triple his salary by going there. Bottom line, I'm trying to say is I don't want him to go, but it's
I
going to
wouldn't be
happen.
shocked. You know, one of the things about Allegri is, in terms of Serie A, he is a coach that will convince players to play under him. You know, and I think Tijani being I don't know if he was a Milan fan, but his dad was, right? And
Yeah, something like that.
I think a
yeah.
guy like Allegri could talk to him and really get the best out of him, but also convince him to stay. The problem is, if there's any coach in the world that'll convince you to leave somewhere, it's Pep Guardiola. And if he's calling your cell phone saying, Tijani, imagine this, you know, we could play you like this, you could do these things, we could win a treble every year with you. All of a sudden you're going, trophies, triple my salary, I just had kids. That sounds pretty nice. You know, Milan's kind of in chaos, won't have Champions League ball the next season. Maybe I go. And if he does it, it'll be really, really hard to paint him as a villain or a deserter or any of those things, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't want him to go, and I do think there is a sliver of a chance that he stays, but I think he does leave. My big fear is that we hold out until after this weird little Club World Cup transfer window, and then he leaves in the main summer window when it's less urgent for less money. That would be worst case scenario.
Yeah, if you were to be offered that up now, you would say, if they come back and offer... I would want it to be 75 mil guaranteed. I don't want 65 plus 10 in add-ons. You know, I want it to be our club record sale, without a doubt. I think that's important. I want us to get
100
every... that should have been our opening demand for me. It should have been... He needs to be 100 million. But... yeah, just the timing aspect of it in this mini window, if it is to get done, and if we are to have our asking price met, it gives you a lot longer to plan how you're going to spend that money. And spend it, we would need to. You know, let's be very clear. We would need to go out and again rebuild the midfield like we did post Tonali. But I said this on the last pod as a bit of a devil's advocate, but I would feel a bit more confident with Tare and Allegri being sort of in charge of how it's spent, rather than Furlani, Moncada, Ibra, and you know, Pioli sort of knocking their heads together and being like, "Well, this Musa guy looks good." You know, it can't be that. We need to go. We need to recreate that production, and whether we try do it again in the aggregate or whether we go for a bona fide star, let's talk about some of the midfield transfer links now. Number one, Luka Modric. Thoughts that broke last night.
Bring him in.
Vibes.
I mean, we've wanted him for the last 6 years, saying we could get a year out of him. It started when he was 36. We said, yeah, he's got one more contract in him, and then it was, we could get 3 years, we could get 2 years. Now it's like, he might have half a season. We could do it, you know?
Yeah.
But
So
I bring him in, but you need someone in addition. He played 57 games last year, had his highest average mob rating in his Real Madrid career last season. But you look at the minutes of those games, and it was off the bench for a lot of them. At Milan, he would be starting. Now, one competition, he might play 40 games if we go far in Coppa Italia. But he needs someone else, because he's not going to give you a full 90 every game at that age. At 40 years old, he'll be 40 in September. It is a move that you take. It's a name value. Again, it's a little fan service. But when you're losing Tijani Reijnders, you better damn well get Tijani 2.0 in there, in addition to Modric.
Yes, yeah. I fully agree with all that. I think the list of pros with Modric are very obvious. You know, he's a Ballon d'Or. He is genuinely one of my favorite players that hasn't played for a team that I support, if that makes sense. Just to watch, like he is a beautiful midfielder, like aesthetically, but also in terms of his engine, his work rate, his passing range, just everything. I don't need to go through his list of attributes. He's a Rolls Royce player, and his game has never really relied too much on pace and like being explosively athletic. So I think, he probably could do a year in Serie A, especially with a team that's doing 1 game a week. But as you rightly say, he is 39 now. We know that he's one bad injury away from that being it. And I wouldn't want that to happen. And he played over 50 games last season across Real Madrid in 6 competitions, which is mental. But he's about to go and play in the Club World Cup for them. So there's that. He's going to arrive potentially even more tired. And salary, we'd have to see about that, whether it was worthwhile.
Wait, does he get okay? Yeah. So the Club World Cup is considered a part of the 24-25 season.
And there was something about contract stipulations, for players that were on expiring deals. They could choose to either extend it and play for their current team, or like with Trent, they're getting getting a fee for him to go early and play.
This is a silly question, but are they going to wear their 25-26 jerseys, or are they going to wear this season still?
Ooh, good question. I think for the marketing, they're going to wear their new shirts, aren't they?
Yeah.
You think.
But it's technically not next season.
Yeah. I'm surprised they haven't done like a Club World Cup special edition shit. That's the way that football's going. But Modric, I would do. I think the important things that he would bring are probably the intangibles, right? The winning experience, the standards that he would set in the dressing room and things like that. But as you say, he cannot be the like-for-like replacement. You would need at least one. You probably need multiple midfielders, let's be honest. Just in the same way that I don't think you bring Ricky in for Reijnders and that's that fixed either. I think they're quite inherently different players, and I don't think Ricky will ever he'll never hit 15 goals.
It's not like Fofana's a locked-in starter every game either,
No, and that's the thing as well with the new coach. It's all a clean slate. There's already talk about how Allegri might like to use Loftus-Cheek, for example. Now, I know what people will say about that, but and then who's the other one? Oh, Adrien Rabiot. Now, you've got your Rabiot PSG shirt on there.
It is not a Rabiot. This is a training shirt. There's no name. But yeah, we've been linked with him before, and he always wanted stupid money. I genuinely don't know where he's playing right now. I have no idea.
Rabiot.
Where is he?
That's it.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, that's weird.
Yeah.
What is Lorenzo talking about? I just said
you're getting cussed out about a love for shit strikers. I have no idea.
Been here. Haven't said anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Story of my life. But yeah, I don't look. He could do a role under Allegri. It's hard to say no to players that he got the best out of.
Yes.
But I don't want to break transfer budget. I don't want to break contract protocol, salary caps. I don't want to break anything for a guy like Rabiot, a guy who could have came here already on a free and said only if I'm the highest paid player on the team. I don't fuck with that. So if he's willing to come here for $4.5 million, and I think that's stretching it, to be honest, but he would be successful.
Yeah, I think Rabiot has been an underrated midfielder. And I was quite happy when we were linked with signing him on a free last summer. But I almost feel like that was the window to get him in, like if it was going to happen, then it had to be that. Now we're going to have to pay a fee, which is probably going to be not 10 million or north of that. His wage demands are going to be what he's earning now. Otherwise, what's the point? He might as well stay and play in the Champions League with Marseille. I think it doesn't feel like there's a lot to this that's concrete, to be honest. Theo Hernandez to Al Hilal, potentially 30 mil plus 5 million add-ons. Now, just before we hopped on and started recording, there was a bunch of reports that came out from Milan News and I think Fabrizio too, saying that he doesn't want to move to Saudi Arabia and would rather wait for European clubs. But Atletico Madrid have come in, but wouldn't offer the same transfer fee. So I think this is going to be an annoying one.
Yeah, my hunch says he stays. I really don't think the market's there for him. I think either he leaves late to Saudi or he stays, because players of the caliber that he once was get offers. Players that are a bit, I don't want to say washed, because it's been 1.5 bad seasons from him, and he could be incredible under Allegri again. But they don't get the offers. You got Como throwing a Hail Mary on the last day of January, which he turned down because he didn't want to play a team without Champions League. and then he's got a team that'll give him 20 million euros a year in salary and turn it down because he wants to stay in Europe. It's like, okay, beggars can't be choosers. You have a contract here. If you want out, you need to accept one of the offers we have accepted. And that's it. So pick a place, but we set a price for you. The world now knows it's 35 mil, which I think is actually kind of low, but it's hard to get more for a player with 1 year on his contract when he wants away. So it is what it is. Make up your mind. Pick the club.
Yeah. If he's still in doubt about going to Saudi Arabia when a club have offered him 18 million a year, he's not going. So we have to hope that a European team just now senses the opportunity to get, because we know what his market value was even a couple of years ago. Yeah. Maybe even like 18 months ago, we'd have been looking at getting 60, 70 million for him. So now might Atletico Madrid sense the opportunity? I mean, could he do well under Simeone? Could he go somewhere and play as a proper wing back, as we saw towards the end of last season with us? And might some clubs therefore see 30, 35 million as a gamble worth taking? It's possible. Yeah. But if it is to be a Saudi club, I also think we've got that race against time, because Al Hilal want him for the Club World Cup by the sounds of it. So there'll probably be a take it or leave it type situation on the table. And I think Theo's just going to drag his feet, and then we'll see if another club manages to tempt him. But I also don't rule out the possibility that he sits down with Allegri and they say, right, let's go into this season. Let's see how things go. And if they go well, we'll open those contract talks again, Because
and if Rafa's staying, I could see Rafa also talking to him, being like, dude, Allegri's a winner. Like, we could do this 1 more year. Let's do this,
Yeah, the last dance. Or they both renew, Leao stuff, nothing too...
I saw Bayern from some big names, but I mean...
Yeah, I think we should mention that. Bayern and Milan, you said some Premier League clubs have been alerted to the idea that he might be up for changing scenery. But again, I think that's all been put on hold by the fact that we're going through a bit of a revolution and players want to see what's going on. And also, it sounds like Allegri and Tare both want to build the team around him. Same as with Maignan, who is attracting interest from the Premier League too. Same contract situation with him and Theo, just over 12 months left. We don't have a ton of leverage there, but importantly, it sounds like Allegri wants to keep hold of Leao and Maignan definitely, and like make them two pillars of the team. So I don't see either of them leaving.
Yeah, I think they'll stay. Mike, obviously, his renewal talks have reopened, which to me says he wants to stay now that Allegri's here. So, because he knows what defense is like under Allegri, which means as a goalkeeper, you're looking a lot better.
Easy work. Yeah, exactly. 3 centre-backs have been linked. Pick your favourite one. Mario Gila of Lazio, Giovanni Leoni of Parma, and Jacob Bijol of Udinese.
Leoni for me.
Yeah, 18-year-old. He's one of the specific requests from Allegri. Says, I really like him, go and get him. And if he sees something in an 18-year-old kid, because he's had a lot of criticism for only playing older guys and stuff like that. And then in terms of replacing Theo, Udogie seems to be the main name at the moment. Cambiasso came out. Now that would be incredible, but that's not happening.
That's the deal of the window. If we get Cambiasso, it's a wrap. Like that's the guy for me. Because
Theo, who? If he comes
exactly.
In?
There's very few players that could replace Theo where I'm immediately sold and I'll have zero doubts. Cambiasso's that guy. Udogie, I'll have some doubts. He did obviously just win Europa League with Spurs, but it's not like they had a good season outside of that. I do think overall he's a good player and he could fit, the role pretty well. So I'd be okay with that signing. But Cambiasso's the one. If he's available, you go for it. Now, the money's going to be 50, 60 mil. I mean, that's the thing too with fullbacks is if you have a good fullback, there's like 6 in the world. You hold on to them. And that's why I think we really should revisit Theo's contract. He's only 27. He's literally entering his prime years. Could be the 3 best seasons of his life. Who knows?
Yeah, I don't see the Cambiasso thing happening. I think, didn't Juve turn down like 50 mil from Man City in January?
I don't know, but I wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah, I don't see that one as being possible. But Udogie, I'd be okay with. I'd be content with. I think he's got a lot of upside as well. more rumours are going to come, between now and the next episode, so we can give an update then. Just end with a couple of very quick questions. Lucas Perclid, which formation do you think Allegri will use at Milan? And do you think any players returning from loan can play a part next season?
I think he'll start with a 4-3-3, but we've seen him be flexible. He's not a one system kind of guy. So while I think 4-3-3 might be his main, I wouldn't be surprised if you see 4-2-3-1 again, or if you even see a 3-4-3 or something with a three-man back line, 3-5-2. Probably not a 3-5-2 just because we have so many great wingers, and that would eliminate kind of the need for Leao. So probably not a 3-5-2, but definitely a 3-4-3. Wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, I think one of those. And can loan players return and do a number? Yeah, I think they all can. Benacer coming back would be good if he's in shape. If he's not looking like 2025 me and looking more like 2021 me, then yeah, hell yeah, he could do it. Yeah, I don't remember everyone who got out on loan, but there's players that could do well.
Yeah. So Sky was saying that he's going to play a 4-3-3 or a 4-2-3-1, so exactly what you said. But I find it hard to jump to a judgment like that where we are now. He's not even had a single training session with them. But also, if he really has watched every game that we've played this season, how's he not seen that we performed way better with a three-man defence? And he won the majority of his Serie A titles playing with a three-man defence for Juve. So I won't be surprised if that comes out again. But a 4-3-3, I've been crying out for a long time, just as I was crying out to try a three-man defence when things were going so badly. So I'm fine with either of that. Salamakers sounds like he's not going to Roma, so will return. I think Allegri will like him, and I think Allegri will use him.
He's a perfect Allegri player.
Balance, and he added some end product in the second half of last season to his game as well. So he'd be very useful.
Three-man back line, he's a good wing back to have.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, he could. Imagine that. We wouldn't know who was starting out of Jimenez or Salamakers because they just look the same playing at right wing back. And then the rest, I don't know. I mean, Okafor's going to come back. I can't see Adley being an Allegri player, to be totally honest. Benacer potentially because he likes midfielders with bite and technical ability. Pobega, I don't really see. There's a lot of names there that I think we'll probably look to cash in on rather than force him to make use of. But I also don't think we need as big a squad next season because we're playing once a week. But yeah, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you very much for listening, everybody. A lot has gone on. So much for a quiet week following the conclusion of the season, but there's going to be more to come. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I went to bed last night and at 8:30, a lot of transfer news comes through. I'm like, I fucking ass logging back on and doing all this, but that's what's going to happen now. That's going to happen, but better busy than quiet, I suppose, with all the work we need to do. We'll be back later this week with another bonus episode. Drop us a comment with your thoughts on what we've discussed in this episode. In the meantime, I've been your host, Ollie Fisher. Find me on Twitter at Ollie Fisher. AJ, cheers for joining.
See you guys on Friday or Thursday.
Friday or Friday, yeah. Have a fantastic week, everyone.